Ratcliffe, congratulations on your nomination. Let me follow up on Senator King's questioning. He asked if you had seen any intelligence that the coronavirus originated in one of the two labs in Wuhan, and you said no. Have you seen any intelligence that supports the Chinese Communist Party's claim that it originated in a seafood market in Wuhan?
No.
I presume you're aware that the respected scientific journal, The Lancet, published a study of Chinese scientists in January that concluded that, in fact, it did not originate in the market?
I have.
That more than a third of the original cases had no contact with the market whatsoever, include what they believe to be the first known case as well.
I didn't recall that, but if that's what that reflects.
Are you aware that, to the best of our knowledge, there's no evidence that bats of any kind, to include the horseshoe bat, was even sold in a seafood market?
That is my understanding.
So
just to be clear, the point I was trying to make is it's been a while, and through no one's fault, since I've had an updated classified briefing regarding the coronavirus pandemic.
I understand, and I'm asking those questions not just to speak about the virus, but more particular a matter of intelligence analysis. Everything that we just discussed is not clandestine collected information. It's not a national security secret. It is publicly reported in a journal like The Lancet or in news sources or so forth.
Correct.
Much of what we know about the virus is the result of publicly reported information or social media evidence from Wuhan in the early days and so forth. How critical is the role of that kind of unclassified public information in the analysis that our Intelligence Committee should be conducting?
It's, I think, vitally important. I think one of the things that we're seeing is OSINT, or open source intelligence, is increasingly valuable, and we need to find ways to make sure that we're collecting it and analyzing it. It's a huge, because it's large sets of data that we need to be processing there. And so it's a challenge, but it's a tremendous source of information, and should be utilized by the intelligence community going forward.
I couldn't agree more. I think there's always a bias towards thinking if a secret is not stolen through clandestine means, then it's not valuable information, when all of these pieces of information, whether we're talking about the Chinese coronavirus or what Russia is up to in Europe or Iran's nuclear program, stitched together into a mosaic. And that mosaic usually is a question of circumstantial evidence that you can use common sense to reach the best conclusion, not direct evidence, not conclusive proof. You want to respond?
I was just going to say, to give you an example of how we might sort of forward-looking on this issue, open source intelligence, if we used open source intelligence tools, we may be able to get earlier warnings around pandemics like this or viruses like this as they're beginning. So those are the types of, when I was referring to how the intelligence community can leverage open source information, that's what I was referring to.
Now, moving on to one of the Director of National Intelligence chief responsibilities, which is setting the priorities for the kind of intelligence our nation needs to collect. Last week, the acting Director of National Intelligence released a statement saying, "The intelligence community will continue to rigorously examine emerging information and intelligence to determine whether the outbreak began through contact with infected animals or if it was a result of an accident at a laboratory in Wuhan." The New York Times subsequently reported that senior National Security Council officials urged the intelligence community to collect additional information to the extent possible on the origin and cause of the Wuhan pandemic. The New York Times and other media outlets have somehow suggested that would be inappropriate. Is it inappropriate for the President to set collection priorities on what he thinks is urgent national questions, and for you as DNI to drive those priorities as best you can, given the facts that our intelligence officers are able to gather?
That would be appropriate.
I think that would be completely and totally appropriate. That's exactly what we would expect the Cabinet, or the President and his senior national security cabinet members to do. One final question I have. I've heard a lot of questions about this on both sides today. You're obviously a politician right now. You got an R after your name. Some people have raised the question whether you can separate politics from intelligence. We've discussed in the past that this has been done successfully at times. If you look at someone like Leon Panetta was a pretty partisan guy when he was in the Congress and when he was Bill Clinton's chief of staff, but was an outstanding director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Or if you look at it from the other way, take someone like Bob Gates, lifelong intelligence professional, but since he's left the government, it's pretty clear to everyone that he's a Republican, and he's supported Republican candidates for office since he got out of office, even though he served in a Democratic administration. So I just want to point out, even those are not the D&I job, but the Director of Central Intelligence job, they have a similar need for separating politics from intelligence, and that this is something that can be done and that has been done in the past. And wanted to see if you have comments about those precedents or how you'll separate politics from intelligence.
Well, I appreciate the question, Senator, and earlier I talked about the fact that I very much love representing the people here in Congress, but I held an apolitical job before as U.S. Attorney, one where I represented the United States and neither party, and kept both parties out of everything that I did. And so I have done that and done it successfully and been highly regarded for the way that I've approached that, and I enjoyed that. And it's one of the reasons that I'm going from a safe district and asking you all to consider me as the nominee. I have every, not just every intention, but every confidence that I will do exactly as I'm telling you, that I will be entirely apolitical as the Director of National Intelligence.
Thank you very much.
Senator Harris.